So you're either 2-0, 1-1, or 0-2 going into week 3. And that's okay. Ride the wave because anything can happen going into next week. So today I'm bringing you my top start sit wide receivers going into week 3 of the fantasy football season. Last week I had the running back position. I told you guys to start people like James Cook, Ramondre Stevenson, Rachaad White to sit, Alexander Mattison. Those guys sit. Obviously you hit and you miss on some, which is okay. But once again, that's the whole part of fantasy. But let's get straight into my first start wide receivers of this week coming in. And before I tell you this person, everybody last week was asking, what the hell's happening? I'm panicking. Should I trade him away? Should I sit him? Should I just drop him? Should I start some other crazy people over this player? I was like, you got to ride the wave. I'm pretty sure everyone else in the fantasy community was telling you, you have to start all these other players over this player. And I was like, I'm going to give him some grace. And that was Drake London, and I'm so happy that I continue to stay my ground. I said, give him grace. I'm going to be starting Drake London still over some people. I don't think he is not going to get not just one target for the whole game. It was going to change. He is playing the Detroit Lions coming into week 3, who give up the third most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Once again, you were probably panicking. You were saying, what the hell is happening? But he did okay. 6 out of 7 targets, 67 yards and a touchdown for over 18 fantasy points. Look, one of the biggest things coming into last week, I was saying they have to eliminate the run. And I knew Green Bay was going to do that. And I think that's exactly what a lot of other teams are going to do as they see the success from, them stopping that run game. Now, the Packers did lose in one of these last minute calls, which is fine. But if they eliminate this two-headed monster in Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson, I think a lot of other teams like the Detroit Lions are going to game plan for that, right? And if you look at the Detroit Lions, who have a decent run defense, I think they can really stop him. Like, leads me to my first point. If you look at what they did this past week against the Seattle Seahawks, Kenneth Walker was held to 43 yards in week 2. He did score 2 touchdowns, so he definitely was an up there in fantasy relevancy. But if you go back to week 1 in the opener versus the Chiefs, they held Isaiah Pacheco to 70 yards in week 1. So in my opinion, if that continues for the Detroit Lions, would they have a lot of injuries in the secondary, Drake London could be eating, and which will result in Arthur Smith to throw the ball a little bit more because there's going to be a lot more gaps in the secondary than in the front. Obviously, we see, this great defense with Aiden Hutchinson, this the front four. I think it's pretty good. They just struggled a little bit versus the secondary, which we saw Tyler Lockett and everyone else eat. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, all 8, even Noah Fant at the tight end position had some success as well yesterday or this past week. I can see that. Not only that, the attempts in the air, especially when this Atlanta Falcons offense is struggling, they say, okay, we can't run the ball. We need to throw the ball. We saw in week 1, Desmond Ridder had 18 attempts in the air. And you go to week 2 this past week, 32 attempts in the air. That is almost double passing attempts for Desmond Ridder going into week 2. And I think that can continue, not saying continue to double, but at least he can throw at least 25 to 35 attempts going into week 3 if the team, game plans for this run game. So Drake London, I think, is a great start coming into week 3 versus the Detroit Lions. All right, my second start. This is one of my favorite starts coming into this week. I call this my smash start. Everyone should be starting him. If you go on our live streams, I'm going to be probably telling you to start him over a lot of people coming into this week. But that is Zay Flowers versus the Indianapolis Colts. And why? The Colts give up the most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. And when you look at what the Colts have done in the past couple weeks, it is kind of crazy. Let me tell you the numbers that they gave up in week 2 to a rookie quarterback in C.J. Stroud with all these wide receivers that no one was really expecting to do, okay? Nico Collins caught 7 out of 9 targets for 146 yards and a touchdown, over 27 fantasy points. Tank Dell, a rookie wide receiver, right? Caught 7 out of 10 targets, over 72 yards and a touchdown, over 20 fantasy points. Roberto Woods caught a 6 out of 9. If you know, you know. 70 yards, 74 yards, over 13 fantasy points. If you combine that all together, 20 receptions, 28 targets, nearly 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, just over 61 fantasy points. just for CJ Stroud and these 3 wide receivers. Now the Indianapolis Colts is playing against Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, OBJ, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews. I mean, you can expect everyone to eat in this offense. It's going to be crazy. This is why this is a smash start for me. Not only that, I know I did mention OBJ. I don't know if OBJ is going to be playing coming into week 3 because he did leave the game last week against the Bengals with an ankle injury, which means it's going to open up the door for Zay Flowers coming into week 3, which I would 100% be excited to start if OBJ is not playing. A smash start coming into week 3. One of my favorite starts coming in, Zay Flowers. All right, my third must start coming in, Jordan Addison versus the Los Angeles Chargers. Look, this game could arguably be one of the highest scoring games coming into this week. It feels like the Chargers have been in every high scoring game so far, and I think it can continue, especially with the Vikings, who have struggled 0-2. Fall to 0-2, obviously Kirk Cousins, but you still have Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison with this addition. And look, last week we saw Jordan Addison scored this touchdown in the Eagles secondary, which we all were saying, I don't know if we should start him, but he did okay. Look, no doubt Addison can go behind the Chargers secondary, who has been cooked by Tyreek Hill and even Treylon Burks on one play. Only need one play from Jordan Addison. I think he is going to progress his workload. And we've kind of seen that. In week 1 versus Tampa Bay, only 56% of the snaps, caught 4 to 6 targets, 61 yards and a touchdown, just over 16 fantasy points. In week 2 versus Philly on that Thursday night, 69 snaps. What's that? 13 quick maps, 13% more snaps, caught 3 out of 5 targets, 72 yards and a touchdown, just over 16 fantasy points. Once again, he's going to get more snaps, which will lead to more opportunities, which will lead to more points, which will lead for you to starting him more confidently week in and week out as we go throughout the season. This was one of Zach's, even myself, I was saying Jordan Addison, Zach and I have been saying Jordan Addison could be the highest scoring rookie coming in for the 2023 rookie class. And I think that is going to be continuing. Caught 16 fantasy points in both games. I know Zay Flowers is right behind there, to be honest, because he did have a crazy week 1. But I think this is a good opportunity. Not only that, I would also imagine if the Minnesota Vikings cannot get Alexander Mattison going, I think they might have to ditch the running game here potentially, and then maybe just resort to throwing the ball. Alexander Mattison is not Dalvin Cook, and Dalvin Cook himself is not looking too good. But if he can't get something going this week specifically against this team, I'm not necessarily, who, by the way, the Chargers give up a lot of points to the running back position, then this could result in just throwing the ball, a more high-powered passing offense going into the next level category. I think they might just abandon the run game and say, thank you so much for your service, Alexander Mattison, just block for Christian Kirk. So we'll see what happens. Jordan Addison versus the Chargers, a great start. By the way, the Chargers gave up the 4th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position, so I will be starting him with confidence. My 4th must-start wide receiver coming in is Tyler Lockett versus the Carolina Panthers. Lockett had the game that we all expected him to have, especially in week 1. Week 1, we didn't see that workload. We were saying, what the hell happened? He was playing the Los Angeles Rams, so it was like, well, they're not too good. What happened? And the Rams won. The Seahawks wasn't looking like themselves. They come back, went to overtime, and then win in overtime. Tyler Lockett scores that game-winning touchdown. Oddly enough now, the Carolina Panthers give up the 3rd fewest points to the wide receiver position, but context is important. Week 1 versus the Atlanta Falcons, the Panthers gave up 115 yards in the air. Now, you can probably see in the screenshot on your screen, this is our leading receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. That is Kyle Pitts with 44 yards. I mean, makes sense why they gave up the least amount of fantasy points to the wide receiver position. They only gave up 115 yards in the air. Obviously, Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier ate that day. Now, you go to week 2 this past week, Monday night game, you kind of see, okay, well, they gave up more than double the yards in week 2 versus the Saints, who have a significantly better offense, I would say, just offense as a whole. And you see them give up 236, which is literally more than double than what they gave up in week 1. The Panthers were also struggling at defense with injuries, obviously with J.C. Horn and Shaq Thompson, who is no longer on, well, not longer, but it looks like he's going to be out for the season or out for multiple weeks. Now insert Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, JSN, and Tyler Lockett. Everyone should be eating coming in here for the Seattle Seahawks. So Tyler Lockett is a phenomenal start coming into week 3. All right, my 5th got 2 more starts. I got some honorable mentions at the end, so definitely stay tuned for that. Okay, so my next start here is a group of wide receivers, and that is any Jags wide receivers versus the Texans. Okay, the Texans currently give up the 9th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position, and I'll keep it short and sweet, right? You look at the Jags upsetting a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, and you're saying, well, they were moving the ball, they just couldn't get into the end zone, right? And when you look at this offense, you can see it, and you probably see a screenshot on your screen now. Calvin Ridley held to 32 yards, caught he had 8 targets that game. He only got 2 out of 8 targets, which is crazy. Zay Jones was targeted 6 times, caught 0. But the one that really did 8 was Christian Kirk, caught 11 out of 14 for over 110 yards, which I think you can confidently start him going in. Obviously, you're going to be starting Calvin Ridley, but if there's other people maybe in deeper leagues, whatever the case may be, you have Christian Kirk, I'll be starting Christian Kirk with confidence this week, especially if Zay Jones is not going to be playing. Now, if Zay Jones does play, because he is dealing with they're saying he's considered day-to-day. Now, if Zay Jones does play, I will be interested in starting him depending on the news that comes out later in the week, saying, well, is he practicing? Is he limited? Is he going to be limited in the game? Like he might play, or he's going to be limited in the game. All depends on the context, right? So right now, without a doubt, you're starting Calvin Ridley, but if you were questioning Christian Kirk coming in, I'm starting Christian Kirk coming into week 3. So once again, Texans give the 9th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So I'm going to be starting him with confidence. All right, my last wide receiver that you should be starting, which a lot of people didn't start, like myself, because I didn't know if he was going to be playing on Monday night, that doubleheader. And that is Amari Cooper versus the Tennessee Titans. The Titans give it the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. And now with Nick Chubb gone, I think this offense is going to look significantly different. And we've been talking about this. Head coach Stefanski was saying this offense is going to be more pass heavy. Deshaun Watson is saying this offense is going to be more pass heavy. They couldn't get anything going on in the air and was getting it done in the ground. Then Nick Chubb gets hurt in that game. Now they're really going to have to result in throwing the ball with Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore. By the way, Elijah Moore is a bonus person that I say you should be able to start here as well, because let me tell you, he was also getting the targets, which is also really frustrating, right? So Amari Cooper in this Monday night game that just passed caught 7 out of 9 targets, 90 yards, and 16 fantasy points. He is no doubt the alpha on the team, and he looks like he's confidently going to be getting the points moving forward without a doubt, right? And once again, they gave up the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. But now you want to be looking at Elijah Moore hypothetically. Let's say you don't have Amari Cooper, but you have an Elijah Moore. Like myself, I have a lot of Elijah Moore and a little bit less of Amari Cooper. Let's look at the snaps, the route runs, and the targets and compare him to Amari Cooper coming into week 2. Because I still believe Elijah Moore, even though he didn't have an amazing game, the targets are still there in the past 2 games. Look at this. Donovan Peoples-Jones, 76 snaps, right? 43 routes run, 3 targets. Amari Cooper, 63 snaps, probably because he was injured with the groin, so he was probably a little bit limited. 42 routes run, 9 targets. Okay, Elijah Moore, 67 snaps, the second most on the team, mind you, 42 route runs, and 9 targets. He is tied with first with Amari Cooper in targets. Now, if you watch this game in full, which I did, Deshaun Watson couldn't get it going. Elijah Moore was open more than half of the time, and what did he do? He would have rather stepped into the pocket and scramble and then get sacked. Fair? I don't expect that to happen every single game, and I may seem a little bit aggressive because I'm an Elijah Moore believer, and that's okay. But if you watch the game with all the context there, you can even see one play in the 4th quarter where Elijah Moore goes up to Deshaun Watson and he goes, "Throw me the ball, I'm open." And what does he do in the very next play? It was a 3rd and 12. Elijah Moore is wide open and they get the first down. They still lose the game. Sorry for spoilers alerts for if you didn't watch the game, but if you probably should have watched the game by now. They still lost the game. So I'm still believing in the targets. I'm still believing in this chemistry to build, especially with Nick Chubb gone, unfortunately. You know, I mean, it really sucks that Nick Chubb looked phenomenal. But you expect this team to result in passing the ball more, which we already expected. So keep that in mind. Amari Cooper, I think, is a phenomenal start coming into week three. Also, Elijah Moore, who are playing, once again, the Tennessee Titans, will give up the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So hopefully that helps. Let me go and give you my must-sit wide receivers coming into this week, and that is Hollywood Brown versus the Cowgirls. I like to call them the Cowboys because I'm a Giants fan. I can't really say that because we got shut out 40-0 in week 1, but we'll see what happens. The Cowboys give the 3rd most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. There is no way at this very moment, especially how good this Cowboys defense is playing, I want to start anyone remotely that is playing against the Cowboys defense. Now, Garrett Wilson did have a breakout game. Not a breakout game, a break play, which kind of saved his fantasy day, but I don't think that's consistent coming in. Other than that, I do not want to start Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown and Josh Dobbs looked phenomenal against the Giants in the first two halves of the game, and it just completely disappeared. And that does happen to this Cowboys defense, who is significantly better. I think we can see that second half of the Cardinals offense for the whole game for the Cowboys game. So keep that in mind. I want to sit, Hollywood Brown. My second sit, who I kind of mentioned in that take, is Garrett Wilson versus the Patriots. Now, the Patriots are in the middle of the pack defense, and I understand if you have to start Garrett Wilson. I am in the same position. I have Garrett Wilson in multiple big home leagues and in our follower leagues, and I'm highly considering sitting him because if you watch that Cowboys game against the Jets, even though he got 8 targets, which you like and hope for, the history with Garrett Wilson versus Bill Belichick is not fun. Number one. Zach Wilson versus Bill Belichick is not fun. Number 2, Zach Wilson just doesn't look good. And even though Garrett Wilson is going to get peppered with targets, if he didn't get that play where he broke in the secondary, where I do believe the Cowboys were just playing man and just sending everyone to Zach Wilson, and Zach Wilson just threw the dart to Garrett Wilson and he broke it for the touchdown, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You would be saying you probably started Garrett Wilson and you really regretted it, but he got 8 targets. I don't want to get to that point, right? I don't want to get to that scenario. So obviously I'll be starting every single person I did mention here in my list over Garrett Wilson. And honestly, if you have Garrett Wilson, please come to our live stream and comment, and we will help you as much as possible. And I can give you an even deeper video or live stream to talk to you about Garrett Wilson, because honestly, I can talk to him a whole 15-20 minutes about why I do not want to start him and list every single person I don't want to start. I would rather start over Garrett Wilson going in the future. And if I can sell him now, maybe this could be a good sell high video. I wonder if Zach is going to bring it. He does have the sell high wide receivers coming into this week, but I will be trying to sell him high, but I don't think anyone wants to bite on that. All right, and my last must sit player, keep with us because I'm going to be bringing some honorable mentions of start sits, right? So Treylon Burks versus the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns currently give the 2nd fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position, and Treylon Burks is just, he's not there for me, right? And if you think of Treylon Burks and what he did, week 1 played 90% of the snaps against New Orleans, caught 2 out of 3 targets. He had under 4 fantasy points. This past week, he did get 10 fantasy points, but it was because of that bomb that Ryan Tannehill threw, and he almost scored the touchdown, which is phenomenal, but the targets aren't there. Caught 3 out of 4 targets. I don't think this is going to get any better with Cleveland when he comes into the secondary, to be completely honest with you. So I want to be seeing Treylon Burks coming into week 3. So hopefully that helps, guys. And here's some honorable mentions. Some guys that these start players, look, these start wide receivers I'm going to be bringing you, I feel comfortable starting depending on your depth in your league and how you feel. And the sit players may be a little bit controversial, but we'll see how we go. So my first must honorable mention must start here is Gabe Davis versus the Commanders, right? Gabe Davis had a great game this past week. I did say he could be a sneaky upside play, which he was. He had like over 20 fantasy points, and he's going to play the Washington Commanders this week. I think it can happen again coming into week 3. George Pickens versus the Raiders, even though he did get that breakout touchdown, which probably saved his game. And Kenny Pickett now has win under his belt, even though it wasn't because of him, it was more because of the defense. They are playing the Raiders, who are just terrible, and maybe he can find his rhythm against the Raiders. I like George Pickens coming into this week as well. And the last guy here, which is not exciting depending on how deep you are, maybe in a 14-man league, 16-man league, whatever that is, the 49ers give up a lot of points to the wide receiver position, and I'll be choosing Isaiah Hodgins because he did get the most targets outside of the wide receiver room coming into this week, especially with Saquon Barkley out. They might have to result in throwing the ball significantly more than they would like to. So Isaiah Hodgins, once again, not somebody I am running to start, but maybe some quick honorable mentions that you say, if you want to take the risk, you can. All right, Patriots wide receivers is my first must sit. Kendrick Bourne, you think of Juju Smith. I know Kendrick Bourne had a decent game week 1. You know, he was a good waiver wire pickup, but it doesn't look like they're going to be consistent. Juju Smith just doesn't look like Juju Smith, right? I don't want to be starting him. Jerry Jeudy, a very controversial one. I think he's a great buy low at the moment, and I think he could be a hard sit depending on how you want to see it. But he's playing the Miami Dolphins, who currently give the 7th fewest amount of fantasy points to the wide receiver position. I don't know. I think if there's somebody better, I would rather start. Like, you know, you think of the people that I name. Are you starting Jerry Jeudy or Tyler Lockett this week? I think these are good names, right? Jerry Jeudy or Drake London. You know, Jerry Jeudy or whoever else, right? Like, I think these are tough names that are going to come about, and I think I would rather start all those names over Jerry Jeudy right now. I do believe in Jerry Jeudy long term, but this week I want to wait and see what that looks like. And last person, Rashid Shaheed versus the Packers. Look, Rashid, he's been breaking out. He's been getting these good plays, but it's the big chunk plays. Now playing the Packers, who I think have a significantly better secondary. I don't know if I want to be starting Rashid Shaheed coming into this week. All depends on how deep your leagues are, right? Maybe you're in the 15. This is more 14, 16-man leagues where you're going to say, well, should I start Rashid Shaheed? Maybe not, okay? So those are my honorable mentions, my must-start, must-sits. Guys, coming into this week, guys, comment down below if any start sit questions you have. Let's see if we can get to 150 likes. We go live every single day at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, answering all of your start sit questions. And before we do go, obviously, go to flockfantasy.com/land. The best place to support what Zach and I are doing here. I always say this, Zach is pumping out his content. Over 300 plus players start sit going into every single week, and going into week 3 as well. He's going to be releasing here, hopefully by the time this video is out. Once again, every single position, wide receiver, quarterbacks, tight ends, even defenses that he has starts of the week, and so much more. Not only that, if you want to get a fantasy hotline, a personal contact with Zach and myself saying, hey, who should I trade for? Who should I sit? Once again, flockfantasy.com/land, the best place to support what we are doing here, guys. Good luck going into week 3, and it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.